Okay, so you want to own a medieval inn. At dusk, the road is finally paying you back. A merchant arrives with mud on his boots and goods in his cart. A pilgrim asks where he can sleep. A local farmer comes through the door for ale and news. Somewhere upstairs, every available bed is occupied. Down below, cups keep moving across the table. You look around and see the multiplication. Every traveler needs a bed. Every traveler may buy ale. Every day brings new customers. If the road stays busy, the inn appears to be a machine that turns footsteps into money. That is the picture. What the picture does not show is the land claim attached to the building, the dues that may follow it, the labor required to keep it open, the cost of maintaining walls that cannot be allowed to fail, or the possibility that one fire could destroy the very asset producing your income. And there is a deeper problem. The surviving evidence does not give us one universal medieval room rate, wage bill, tax schedule, or innkeeper's annual profit. Medieval Europe was not one market. A rural inn in England, a market town inn in France, and a busy establishment on an Italian trade route were not interchangeable businesses. So the question is not simply, how much does a medieval inn make? The real question is this: are you making money from the beds and ale, or from the traffic that gives you the chance to sell them? And if the traffic disappears, what happens to everything you still owe? To make the business concrete, imagine a representative late medieval inn in a European market town, positioned close enough to a trade route or pilgrimage road to receive travelers, but connected enough to serve the surrounding community. This is not one named establishment, and it is not a modern hotel transported backward through time. It is a model built from the functions we can actually document. The first thing you discover is that owning an inn does not necessarily mean owning the ground beneath it in the modern sense. Land in the medieval economy was tied to relationships. A lord might hold a superior claim. A tenant might occupy the premises under customary terms. A town might impose conditions on commerce. A household might operate the building while owing labor, produce, rent, dues, or other obligations to someone above it. The exact arrangement depends on the place and the century. That uncertainty is not a technical footnote. It changes the entire business. If you buy or inherit an existing inn, you may be acquiring a working building, a reputation, and access to a valuable location. But you may also be taking on an old obligation attached to the property. If you construct an inn, you gain more control over the design, but you have to spend before you know whether enough travelers will come. The building itself requires substantial investment. Construction costs money or labor. Decoration matters because the inn has to look respectable to people deciding whether to sleep inside it. Maintenance never ends. Roofs fail. Timber deteriorates. Fixtures wear out. Walls and doors must remain usable. The inn cannot simply be closed for repairs every time money gets tight, because closing the building means giving the road to a competitor. You are not paying to create a room once. You are paying to keep a room available over and over again. That is the first fixed cost. It exists whether the bed is occupied tonight or not. Then there is access. Medieval commerce did not operate through one simple national rulebook. Merchant guilds could negotiate with local authorities over tariffs and safe passage arrangements. Craft guilds organized training and controlled access to particular trades. Guilds could protect insiders and political allies, while making life harder for outsiders. None of this proves that every innkeeper belonged to a particular guild or needed a universal innkeeping license. It does prove that commercial opportunity was shaped by institutions. Your location is not just a spot beside a road. It is a position inside a network of permissions, tolls, relationships, and local power. You might have the building and still lack the access that makes the building valuable. That is what you actually buy, not just walls. A relationship with a road, a town, a landholder, local authorities, suppliers, and the people who decide whether strangers are welcome. Now follow the first customer. A traveler reaches your door near sunset. He wants a place to sleep. He may also want ale. Those are the two products we can safely place at the center of this business: beds and ale. The transaction sounds simple until you try to record it. What does he pay? In which coin? At what local rate? Does he settle immediately later or through a mixture of goods and credit? Medieval transactions were not standardized in the way a modern hotel invoice is standardized. In some places and periods, commodity exchange remained important. A local account might measure value through goods, services, obligations, and coins that did not have one stable relationship to each other. A promise from a merchant is not the same thing as cash in your hand. A payment in goods may help you operate, but it is not automatically easy to use for every obligation attached to the inn. So your first sale creates revenue, but it may not create usable liquidity. The bed is also more than a mattress. It represents security, trust, and information. A traveler chooses an inn because he expects a roof, a place within a community, and some degree of protection for himself and whatever he is carrying. The innkeeper's reputation becomes part of the product. That reputation is one of the few assets that does not sit visibly in the building. A merchant who trusts your establishment may return. A pilgrim may recommend it along the road. A local resident may use it as a meeting place. A noble may pass through with an entourage. A laborer may visit for ale and news. The customer base is socially mixed, but the proportions and spending habits are not known well enough to turn into a clean forecast. And the functions of the inn are mixed as well. An inn could serve as a commercial exchange, a diplomatic meeting place, a center for news, and a social venue. But those functions do not automatically become separate revenue lines. A meeting may bring prestige without a fee. News may bring repeat traffic without appearing in the ledger. A reputation for being connected may support bed and ale sales without anyone paying specifically for information services. This is where the business starts to look different. The visible products are beds and ale. The invisible product is access to movement and trust. The more valuable the road, the more valuable the inn's position. Inns on busy trade or pilgrimage routes could charge higher rates because demand was stronger. Rural inns generally faced lower rates and often served as community hubs. That creates two very different business models. On a busy route, you have the opportunity to earn more from passing traffic, but you are dependent on that traffic. If the route changes, if commerce slows, or if travelers stop coming, your highest value advantage can disappear without the building moving an inch. In a rural community, you may have a more stable local role, but the lower rates make it harder to cover a costly property. The inn may be busy in a social sense while remaining weak in a financial sense. A room full of people is not the same as a room full of surplus. The easiest mistake is to count customers before counting what each customer contributes. Take one occupied bed night. Start with the local lodging payment. Add any ale sold during the stay. Then subtract the direct goods required to serve that customer, the labor involved, and any settlement costs. What remains is not yet profit. It has to help pay for the building, maintenance, land obligations, tariffs or dues where applicable, and the work of keeping the inn open. That remaining amount is the contribution of the customer to the wider business. Your break-even point is the number of occupied bed nights and ale transactions required to cover the costs that continue even when the inn is quiet. We cannot responsibly insert a universal historical number into that calculation. The evidence does not give us a reliable set of local prices, volumes, wages, capacity, or obligations that belong to one place and one period. Anyone who announces that the typical medieval inn earned a precise annual amount is probably combining figures from different centuries, countries, and definitions. But the structure of the calculation is clear. If the bed is empty, you lose the chance to collect its lodging payment, but the building still needs to exist. If the bed is occupied, you gain revenue, but you may also use bedding, fuel, labor, ale, food, and other supplies. If ale sales are strong, they may help support the establishment, but their contribution depends on what the ale costs you to obtain or produce. The crucial variable is not simply how much the customer spends. It is how much of that spending survives after the customer has been served. That distinction changes the way you look at a busy evening. Suppose every table is occupied, the room is loud. Customers are ordering, you feel successful. But a crowded room can conceal several different realities. Perhaps the rate is low, because the local community cannot afford more. Perhaps the ale is expensive to obtain. Perhaps the building is overlarge for the amount of demand you can sustain across the year. Perhaps the inn is being kept alive by your unpaid labor. Perhaps the receipts are arriving in forms that cannot immediately settle the obligations attached to the property. The cash box is not the same thing as the business, and your own labor is not free. If you live above the inn, serve customers, supervise supplies, settle disputes, maintain the building, and remain awake whenever travelers arrive. The money left after expenses contains two different things. Part of it is payment for the work you are personally performing. The rest is the return on the capital and risk tied to the inn. Calling all of it profit makes the business look better than it is. This is one reason historical business comparisons are dangerous. A modern owner can separate salary from profit. A medieval household business may blur them together. The owner may appear to be earning a surplus while actually working every waking hour for what another person would consider a wage. The same problem applies to payments in kind. If servants receive board and lodging rather than a fully documented cash wage, the cost is still real. It simply appears in a different form. If the building's maintenance is performed through labor obligations, that does not make maintenance free. It means the economic burden is being carried by someone's time. The innkeeper's ledger may be short because the economy is complicated, not because the business is efficient. Now consider cash flow. Your income may arrive whenever a traveler pays for a bed or ale, but your obligations may not arrive on the same schedule. Some may be paid in money, others may be paid in goods, labor, tolls, or dues. Maintenance is irregular. A roof may remain intact for a season and then demand immediate attention. Ale supplies may need to be secured before they are sold. Labor must be available when guests arrive, not only when revenue is strong. This is the medieval version of the same problem that destroys businesses in every century. The costs refuse to wait for the revenue. A successful market day can make the inn look healthy. It cannot guarantee that the surplus survives the next repair or obligation. And unlike a modern operator, you cannot automatically assume there is an insurance policy, a business loan, or a credit line waiting after disaster. The supplied historical evidence does not document a universal recovery mechanism that you can count on. If a fire destroys the building, the question is not merely whether next month's sales fall. The question is whether the business still exists. Fire is the hidden cost that overwhelms every ordinary calculation. An inn is a large, heavily used structure. It must be built and maintained, and it is filled with people, heat, lamps, and activity. If fire reaches it, the capital invested in construction and decoration can disappear at once. The income-producing premises are gone, the beds are gone. The reputation has to be rebuilt somewhere else, if it can be rebuilt at all. The ale business does not become temporarily unprofitable. It loses its physical location. This is the difference between an operating risk and a solvency risk. A slow week reduces receipts. A damaged roof consumes reserves. A fire can erase the asset that was supposed to generate every future receipt. And yet, the risk is easy to ignore precisely when the inn is doing well. A full house encourages you to expand. You add beds. You improve the building. You make the common room more impressive. You invest in the expectation that the road will remain busy. That investment may be sensible. It may also convert a useful inn into an oversized liability. The bigger the building, the more demand you need to justify it. The more it costs to maintain, the more painful an empty season becomes. And the larger the structure, the more capital you have exposed to a single physical catastrophe. Scale can reduce some operating problems. A busy establishment may spread the work of a household across more customers. It may have stronger relationships with merchants and local authorities. It may be better positioned to serve several kinds of travelers. But scale also multiplies the cost of being wrong. A small inn that misjudges demand may have an empty room. A larger inn may have an entire building whose expenses were designed around traffic that never arrives. The business becomes more efficient only if the added capacity is actually used. This is why location is the first strategic decision, not a decorative detail. On a trade road or pilgrimage road, demand may justify higher rates. The road gives you access to travelers who need a place to stop. A market town may connect you to merchants, local producers, workers, and officials. A rural community may provide a steadier social role even when travelers are fewer. But each location comes with a different form of dependence. The route inn depends on movement. The rural inn depends on local relationships. The town inn may depend on both, while also facing more institutional competition and more political scrutiny. Before you sign away capital, you have to ask what actually produces the traffic. Is it the road itself? A pilgrimage destination? A political center? A seasonal trade? A local community that has nowhere else to gather? And what happens if that source changes? A road can lose importance. A trade route can be disrupted. A pilgrimage pattern can weaken. A toll or political arrangement can make one path more attractive than another. A downturn can reduce the number of merchants willing to travel. The building stays where you put it, the customers do not. The disruption of Italian trade in the mid-15th century illustrates the broader danger. It is not a documented bankruptcy story about one inn, and it does not prove that every inn failed. It shows how a commercial shock can reach businesses whose walls remain intact. When trade contracts, the first damage appears as fewer travelers, fewer transactions, and weaker demand. The obligations attached to the property do not necessarily fall at the same speed. If your business depends on the busiest traffic, your best years may be the years that persuade you to take on the most exposure. This creates a dangerous cycle. A strong season makes you believe demand is permanent. You invest in a larger building or more elaborate operation. The investment raises the amount of traffic required to break even. Then the market slows, and the very expansion that seemed to confirm your success makes recovery harder. You are no longer asking whether the inn can serve customers. You are asking whether enough customers can support the inn you built. The surviving evidence does not provide a named innkeeper with a complete account book, a documented bankruptcy, and a clean sequence of failure. That means we should not invent one and present him as a historical case. Instead, follow the failure chain that the documented conditions make possible. Imagine an innkeeper sees a busy pilgrimage route. Travelers are arriving. Demand appears stronger than in the surrounding countryside. Higher rates seem possible. The innkeeper commits scarce capital to a building that can handle more guests. At first, the decision looks intelligent. More beds mean more potential lodging sales. A stronger common room attracts more local trade. The inn gains a reputation, and the reputation produces more traffic. Then the route becomes less reliable. Maybe trade is disrupted. Maybe travelers choose another path. Maybe the season is poor. The exact shock can vary, but the financial sequence is similar. Lodging receipts fall first. Ale sales weaken with them. Maintenance does not vanish. Land obligations do not automatically disappear. Labor arrangements still have to be managed. The building still has to remain open if the innkeeper hopes to recover. The owner postpones repairs because the weak season looks temporary. Then guests notice the deterioration. A less comfortable inn is harder to recommend. The reputation that once supported demand begins to work in reverse. The owner lowers prices to bring people back. That may increase activity without restoring surplus. The common room becomes busy again, but each transaction contributes less toward the fixed burden of the property. This is the moment when revenue becomes misleading. The innkeeper sees customers and assumes the strategy is working. In reality, the price reduction may be buying movement at the cost of survival. If the owner responds by buying more supplies, the cash problem deepens. If the owner cuts labor too far, service deteriorates. If the owner stops maintaining the structure, the physical risk grows. If the owner tries to expand again, the exposure becomes larger. And if fire arrives during this weakened period, the result is no longer a bad operating year. It is the loss of the capital base. Nothing in that chain requires a foolish owner. Every individual decision can look reasonable at the time. A lower price may seem better than an empty room. Deferred maintenance may seem better than spending scarce cash. A larger building may seem justified by the last busy season. The failure comes from a collection of reasonable decisions built on one wrong assumption: that traffic will remain strong enough, long enough, to pay for the structure. The successful innkeeper makes a different kind of decision, not necessarily the most glamorous one. He does not assume that every useful function of the inn is automatically monetized. A place where merchants meet and news circulates may gain commercial value, but that value has to show up somehow in bed sales, ale sales, repeat traffic, or stronger relationships. Prestige alone cannot settle a land obligation. He asks which customers contribute the most after service, not which customers make the room look busiest. He protects the building before decorating it further. He treats maintenance as part of the product rather than an optional improvement. He keeps the operation small enough that normal demand can support it. He uses the local community to reduce dependence on travelers where possible, without pretending that local social activity is a guaranteed fee. He also understands the difference between a route premium and a permanent advantage. A busy road can make an inn valuable, but the road is not owned by the innkeeper. It is an external asset. The business benefits from it while traffic follows it. That makes location powerful, but also fragile. The building belongs to the operator, or is at least under the operator's control. The movement belongs to everyone else. That is the central asymmetry. You carry the cost of the structure, but you do not control the reason people travel. Now imagine 3 possible endings. In the favorable version, your inn sits near a busy commercial or pilgrimage route. Travelers arrive often enough to support higher local rates. Beds are used regularly, ale moves through the common room, and the establishment becomes known as a dependable place to stop. Your building is maintained before small problems become large ones. Your obligations remain manageable. The local community still uses the inn when travelers are absent. You earn an operating surplus. But what does that surplus represent? If you personally work from dawn until late at night, some of it is your compensation for labor. If the building is held under favorable terms, some of the advantage comes from the property relationship. If the inn later becomes more desirable, that is a separate question from the cash produced by daily operations. The favorable outcome is not every coin collected becomes profit. It is that enough of the traffic survives all the claims on it. In the ordinary version, the inn operates in a market town with mixed demand. Some travelers arrive. Local customers provide part of the business. Rates are not high enough to create dramatic margins, but the establishment remains useful. You work constantly, because hiring enough reliable help would absorb too much surplus. The inn pays its recurring obligations, covers maintenance most years, and leaves you with a modest return. That return may be respectable when measured against the owner's labor. It may be disappointing when measured against the capital tied up in the building. This is not passive income. It is a job, a property risk, and a political relationship wrapped into one business. In the unfavorable version, the inn is rural, the rates are low, or the route that once supported it is disrupted. Demand falls below what the building requires. The common room may still have customers, but not enough high-value activity to support the total burden. Repairs are delayed. Supplies become harder to finance. Obligations consume an increasing share of what comes in. Then one major problem arrives: a fire, a structural failure, a political change, a prolonged trade disruption. The exact event is less important than the condition that existed before it. The inn was already operating with little room for error. The disaster does not create the weakness, it reveals it. In that outcome, part or all of the capital invested in the premises can be permanently lost. There is no honest historical number that tells us how often this happened across medieval Europe. There is also no honest number that tells every aspiring innkeeper how much he could take home each year. The answer depends on the local century, local currency, local rates, local traffic, local labor, the terms attached to the land, the size of the building, and whether the inn survives the hazards around it. That may sound unsatisfying. It is more useful than a false figure. If you want to calculate the business for one actual place, you need to identify the town and period first. Then you need the local lodging rate, the amount of ale sold, the cost of obtaining it, the number of usable beds, the seasonal pattern of traffic, the labor arrangement, the land dues, the tariffs or taxes, and the annual maintenance burden. Only then can you ask how many occupied bed nights are needed to break even. Without those inputs, a precise profit estimate is not analysis, it is decoration. And decoration is already one of the costs you are trying to understand. The most profitable looking part of the inn may not be the most profitable part of the inn. The common room may be packed because prices are low. Ale may be moving because the customers are local and the margin is thin. The beds may be full during a short season. while the building sits under use for the rest of the year. The least visible part may be the thing holding the business together: a valuable location, a trusted name, repeat relationships with merchants, or the ability to attract both travelers and local customers. But even those advantages are not cash by themselves. They are conversion mechanisms. They convert movement into purchases, purchases into receipts, and receipts into the surplus left after obligations. If the conversion fails at any stage, the inn can look prosperous while becoming poorer. This is why the medieval inn is not simply an early hotel. A hotel primarily asks how many rooms can be sold at what rate. Your inn has to ask a more basic question: what kind of movement surrounds the building, and how durable is that movement? A modern owner might inspect occupancy, labor productivity, financing costs, and insurance. You have different institutions, different forms of payment, and different legal relationships, but the underlying problem is recognizable. You have capacity that costs something whether used or not. You have demand you cannot fully control. You have customers whose spending must cover more than the visible product. You have risks capable of destroying the asset itself. The century changes, the logic does not. There is also a temptation to believe that adding more services will solve the problem. If beds are weak, perhaps you add food. If ale is weak, perhaps you serve as a meeting place. If travelers are few, perhaps you rely on local trade. In a specific inn, those choices may be sensible, but they cannot be assumed to work everywhere. Food, stabling, transport, storage, brokerage, credit, and entertainment are not universal lines we can safely insert into the model without evidence from the chosen place. More activity is not automatically more profit. Each new service brings procurement, labor, supervision, risk, and another way for customers to owe you something that is not immediately available as cash. The strongest operator does not ask, "What else can I sell?" He asks, "What can this location support?" Without creating a second business that consumes the first? That is a surprisingly modern question in a very old setting. The innkeeper's real advantage is not that he owns beds. Anyone with enough resources can build beds. The advantage is that he sits where people need to stop and has earned enough trust for them to choose his door. That trust can be lost more quickly than a building can be repaired. A traveler who hears that the inn is unsafe may keep walking. A merchant who finds that his goods are not protected may choose another stop. A local community that no longer sees the inn as useful may take its trade elsewhere. The inn is therefore selling time as much as shelter. It gives a traveler somewhere to pause, a merchant somewhere to negotiate, and a community somewhere to connect. But the owner only gets paid when those functions lead to actual transactions. The rest is atmosphere, and atmosphere does not pay dues. This also explains why an inn's social importance could exceed its direct financial performance. An inn might be central to urban life, yet the owner's operating surplus could remain modest. The establishment could matter to merchants, nobles, pilgrims, laborers, and local residents without producing a spectacular return on capital. Public importance and private profitability are not the same thing. A place can be essential to a community and still be a difficult business to run. So, return to the first evening. The merchant enters. The pilgrim asks for a bed. The local customer orders ale. The room fills, and the building begins to look like the machine you imagined. But now you see what the first version concealed. The merchant's payment must survive the cost of serving him. The pilgrim's bed must contribute to the building that remains standing when he leaves. The ale sale must help cover more than the drink itself. Your own labor must be valued honestly. The land relationship must be understood. The road must remain busy. The structure must survive the fire that does not care how good your season has been. If the inn operates correctly, you may earn a living, build a durable local reputation, and generate a surplus. You might benefit from a valuable position and from the long-term usefulness of the property. But the evidence does not justify promising a universal annual income or a guaranteed payback period. The return can only be calculated locally, and only after distinguishing operating surplus from your own labor and from any change in the value of the premises. If the inn fails, it will probably not fail because nobody ever entered the door. It will fail because the traffic was not valuable enough. The obligations were heavier than expected. The building demanded more capital than the customers could support, or one physical disaster erased the platform on which every future sale depended. The next time you see a medieval inn in a painting, do not look only at the crowded tables. Look at the road. Ask who controls access to it. Ask whether the customers are passing through or returning. Ask whether the rates can support the building. Ask what happens when trade weakens. Ask which part of the business produces usable surplus and which part merely creates the appearance of activity. Because the innkeeper is not really operating a house with beds and ale. He is operating a conversion system. Movement becomes trust, trust becomes transactions, and transactions must become surplus before obligations and fire take it away. A medieval inn does not make money by owning beds. It makes money by turning movement into surplus before obligations and fire turn that surplus into ash.